Anyone else out there noticing how ridiculous our legal system is becoming? Too often nowadays, it seems that criminals are treated as victims, while a victim's right to justice is being neglected. Today, we're going to talk about the case of 27-year-old Ellen Greenberg and how it is that despite her dying from having received over 20 stab wounds, 10 of which was from behind, the city of Philadelphia continues to claim that it was suicide. Is it police corruption and or a cover-up? You will not believe what I'm about to show you. This case is crazy. Let's talk about it. All right. Before we get into all of this, let me first say that the content of this video is probably not advisable for younger children, so you may want to make sure that the kiddies aren't around when you watch. Okay, so this young woman is Ellen Greenberg, a 27-year-old woman who was found dead in her apartment in the city of Philadelphia on January 26th of 2011. Now, from the get-go, this case has been filled with what seems to be everything from the investigational incompetence of Philadelphia police detectives and possibly conspiracy by the police department to cover up said incompetence to the tampering of evidence by a sitting judge. One would think that a case with such clear inference of ongoing impropriety would be investigated with the greatest sense of urgency by the DA's office. However, despite the clear evidence of impropriety, it is not. This is why for 14 years, Ellen Greenberg's parents have been fighting the city of Philadelphia in the pursuit of justice for their daughter. So let's get into why I think this case reeks with the stench of corruption and cover-up. Recently, after approximately 14 years of Ellen's parents fighting the city of Philadelphia to reclassify her death as a homicide or as undetermined due to the very questionable issues surrounding her death, rather than the improbable act of unaliving herself that the ME at the time listed as the cause of her demise, the city's current chief medical examiner, Dr. Lindsay Simon, reviewed the work of the original ME's finding and reaffirmed his assessment that Ellen's cause of death was indeed suicide. But after we look into the case and evidence, let's see if you agree with their conclusion. Or if, like me, you see enough to make you also believe that her affirmation of suicide is absolutely insane. We start with the fact that Ellen's body had 24 stab wounds. You can see from the illustration where the majority of them were located. Now, upon seeing this image, every one of us would find it extremely hard to believe that a person would be capable of stabbing themselves so many times to unalive themselves. The next, and probably most obvious realization upon seeing the locations of the wounds in the back of her neck and head would cause us, I think, to question whether a person would even have the physical dexterity to reach far enough behind their back to inflict these wounds, especially having been probably severely weakened by the blood loss created by who knows how many stab wounds that had already occurred prior, and by the depth of the knife inserted into the back of her neck at the base of her skull. According to the autopsy report, the knife that was still in her chest when her body was found was the last stabbing she experienced. Yet when you see in the illustration how deeply the knife was inserted at the base of her skull, you can't help but ask how it was that that alone did not kill her. I mean, let's think about it. She had already endured multiple stabbings that not only harmed some of her internal organs, but probably also caused an immense amount of blood loss. So how is it that such a deep wound to the base of her skull did not instantly kill her, whereby she was then able to stab herself more times with the chest being the last strike? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, just so you know, if you also think that the ME's assessment of suicide is an outrageous conclusion, take heart, because you and I are not alone in our thinking. Other forensic pathologists who have reviewed the report of Dr. Marlon Osborne, the original medical examiner who ruled Ellen's death a suicide, have also openly disputed his claims based upon the very evidence he presented in his own autopsy report. In an excerpt from a Fox News article dated October 16, 2025, a review of Dr. Osborne's report by board-certified forensic pathologist Dr. Priya Banerjee states the following. The key stab wounds to the base of the brain and deeper into the upper spinal column are inconsistent with being self-inflicted because of the location and associated injuries. Based on that wound, she told Fox News Digital that she believes Greenberg's death was a homicide. Now, one could argue that, hey, one forensic pathologist could evaluate evidence differently than another, and of course, that is true. However, in his initial report, Dr. Osborne first listed Ellen's death as a homicide based on his autopsy findings. It was a little over a month later that he suddenly changed his opinion and reclassified it as a suicide. Sounds kind of suspect, doesn't it? Here is what an excerpt from a Penn Live article in reference to one of the two civil suits Ellen's parents filed against the city reports. A lawsuit, by the way, the city of Philadelphia just settled with them for an undisclosed amount. Faced with the prospect of a high-profile homicide they couldn't solve, detectives lobbied medical examiner officials to change Ellen's manner of death to suicide, the attorneys argued during a December hearing in one of the two civil suits filed by the Greenbergs. On April 4th, 2011, a little over a month after Ellen's death, the medical examiner's office changed the manner of death to suicide. Stern said the change prompted a phone call from Sam Goldberg. Now that's Ellen's fiance, who, if he wasn't, should have been the main suspect in her death. He is quoted as saying, "I just wanted to let you know that the police have finally ruled that it was a suicide," she recounted him telling her. To a person, none of Ellen's close friends believe she stabbed herself to death. Now, isn't it interesting how Sam Goldberg called this lady and said that the police finally ruled her death as a suicide? After all, it was just over a month earlier that the ME had, according to his own autopsy findings, already designated it as a homicide. I cannot help but believe that this suggests there were efforts made by persons over the period of that month to purposely have the homicide designation altered to reflect a suicide. Because if that wasn't the case, why would anyone who was innocent express their apparent relief that the extremely brutal death of their fiancé was changed from a homicide to a suicide? If you were innocent, wouldn't you not only want, but like her parents, fight and demand for investigators to discover the truth? That was a strange reaction for sure. So, why would the attorney for the Greenbergs argue that the police detectives lobbied Dr. Osborne to change his original findings of homicide? Well, the most obvious explanation would be because the investigation process demonstrated absolute incompetence. Here's how. First, Jason Schwartzman, the uncle of Ellen's fiancé, Sam Goldberg, who was a sitting judge at the time and considered to be a distinguished judge in Pennsylvania, entered Ellen's apartment and removed a number of Ellen's belongings before the crime scene was investigated. Items which obviously would be listed as evidence. Included in these items were 3 laptops and 2 cell phones. Now, according to Judge Schwartzman's representative, the police gave him permission to go in and take Ellen's belongings. Yet how does that not infer a severe judicial impropriety conducted by this judge? After all, he must rule regularly on the issue of crime scene evidence whenever a case before him questions the admission of evidence. So why in the world would a quote-unquote distinguished judge who knows that nothing from a crime scene could legally be removed, especially before the police investigates the scene, purposely violate the crime scene and remove evidence? Can anyone be considered unreasonable to suspect that this would only happen if an attempt to hide evidence was not the intent? After all, Ellen's boyfriend was the judge's nephew, and I can pretty much guarantee that this judge has never entered a crime scene to remove evidence for people he was not related to in the past. However, as unbelievable as this was in and of itself, it was not the end of what seems to me to suggest a level of corruption by someone or someones in a position of authority within the police department, because what happened next is frankly unfathomable. You see, a cleaning crew entered the apartment and thoroughly cleaned and sanitized it the day before the crime scene investigators arrived to work the scene. How could that have happened? Well, according to a Fox News article dated 9/14/2025, the building's property manager, Melissa Ware, later explained that an unnamed Philadelphia Police Department representative had advised her to call a third party service to have the apartment thoroughly cleaned. There is no evidence in the record that Miss Ware, the unidentified cleaning service, or the Philadelphia Police Department representative were ever interviewed by investigating authorities. Yet it seems that after such hellacious discarding of common investigative procedures, the Philadelphia Police Department and the DA's office chose not to investigate these violations. Now, how does that not suggest something shady going on? This is what was reported in an article from Penn Live dated February 17, 2025. In Philadelphia, a homicide investigation to furnish the answer was underway. In reality, it was over before it began. That's because the bloody apartment, never sealed as a crime scene, was cleaned and sanitized on January 27th, the day before detectives and their forensics team secured a search warrant and returned on January 28th. By then, there was virtually nothing left to investigate. The probe stalled. More than 13 years later, in a Philadelphia courtroom, the Greenberg's attorneys blasted the investigation as botched from the beginning. Now, what is absolutely insane is that after 14 years, when the Greenbergs finally got their day in court, the original medical examiner, Dr. Osborne, the guy who first claimed that Ellen's death was a homicide and then a month later changed it to a suicide, has now once again changed his mind. This is what was reported on October 16, 2025. Dr. Osborne initially identified the cause of death as multiple stab wounds and the manner as homicide, but later changed the manner to suicide. However, he changed his opinion again earlier this year, writing to the court that it is my professional opinion Ellen's manner of death should be designated as something other than suicide. Now, what I did not get into because of time issues was the evidence of video footage that allegedly contradicts Ellen's fiance, Sam Goldberg's account of what happened that night. I'll leave the link to the Daily Mail article that does a great job going into those details in the description so you can see it for yourself. At the end of the day, there were circumstances that occurred that the most inexperienced investigators would not have let pass. There were obvious questions that should have been stringently investigated and answered. Questions like, why would a sitting judge knowingly enter a crime scene that involved his nephew and remove evidence he clearly knew was illegal to do if he was not attempting to cover up something? Why would police supposedly give him permission to do so if indeed that did happen? Why did the medical examiner first designate the manner of death as homicide and a month later change it to suicide if he hadn't been coerced to do so? Could it possibly have been the judge pressuring someone in the higher ranks of the police department to make the homicide charge go away for his nephew? Could it possibly have been the higher ups of the police department themselves pressuring the ME because they knew that the inexcusable incompetence they demonstrated in Ellen's case violated every investigative protocol in the book, thereby demonstrating how indefensibly inept the department's leadership was, whereby heads would have been placed on the chopping block? Could it possibly have been because the department did not want to be exposed to the level of humiliation that they would have had to endure due to their ineptness? Could it possibly have been because they knew that the way they inexcusably blotched the investigation and clearly violated procedure by potentially having allowed a judge to remove evidence made the department and city liable to an immense financial judgment? And how about having to answer the issue of a potential conspiracy to cover up the homicide by not conducting an investigation into who the police representative was that told the property manager to have a third party clean and sanitize the crime scene before the forensics teams got there? Lastly, with all of the autopsy evidence, How is it that the new chief medical examiner reaffirmed the manner of death was suicide when even the original ME has gone back on record stating that the manner of death should have been listed as homicide? As the city was in the process of being sued, was she pressured to reaffirm the original ME suicide claim as a means to save the city from being found liable in the parents' lawsuit? Everything about this case reeks of corruption and cover up, regardless of how you look at it. And I think it is absolutely insane that despite all of this evidence of impropriety by the judge and the police department, it seems clear that certain persons have done and are yet doing everything they can to not bring justice to Ellen Greenberg and to protect the person who probably brutally took her life. Allow me to end by saying this. For 14 years, the city of Philadelphia has permitted important questions concerning the death of Ellen Greenberg and of a possible police cover up to go unanswered. Ellen deserves justice for her death. Her parents deserve the truth so they can find peace. Too many questions remain unanswered without any reasonable explanation as to why. Unfortunately, as it has become all too common in our current liberal judicial system, it seems that victims who deserve justice continue to get denied. So, what do you think about all this? You think that there was conspiracy at play? Let me know in the comments if you think this is as insane as I think it to be. Well, that's it for me. Don't forget the usual: like, subscribe, share the video with others, all that good stuff that helps the channel grow. And as always, once again, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and God bless you. Till next time.